making I used to say game, but I'm not necessarily making a game. I'm making a game right now. I'm making the stuff that will make a game. Like making stuff with animated faces and speech recognition. And I think at some point it will result in a game, or at least a really cool set of tech demos. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yeah, so face animation. I've done it many times before in lots of different ways. And I have hard-won ideas about what works and what doesn't, or like what isn't a kind of an efficient way to implement animated faces. I don't want to bore you with all that. Let's just get to it. Just saying, this is a passion of mine. This is something I've been working on in various forms for decades. So, can I demo what I did yesterday? I don't know if I can. I think it's very under the hood. So I'll just briefly do a small orientation on what the app is. And I'll get right back into what I was working on yesterday, because I only got like an hour on this session. I don't want to waste it. An hour between the time I get off work and when I eat dinner and watch some movies and stuff with my wife and then go to bed. Okay, so let's not waste this hour. Let's go see what this whole thing is I'm working on. Okay, here's a face, a little face here. Represents about 3 days of work. Or actually more like 4 hours of work spread across 3 days. And to add to this mouth, I would like there to be like a whole face with 2 eyes and what I'm calling canvas components for each of these things. I want the code that controls the mouth to not necessarily know what the rest of the face is doing. Eyes, and if the ears are twitching or whatever, it doesn't need to know. The code that's responsible for drawing the mouth will just receive events about what's happening that might influence how the mouth should be shown, and it will act accordingly. So there's a pub sub style of messaging that I wrote up over the last day or so. Okay, next thing I need for this face thing to be successful is some hierarchical control and relationship over the different components drawn in it. And I created a class for that yesterday, and it was, it was like, 300 lines of code or something. And my spidey senses started tingling and said, I really ought to write some unit tests for this before I just start trying to use all this new code. So that's what I'm going to do in this episode. Unit tests. Unit tests. Game developers don't like unit tests. A lot of very practical developers don't like unit tests. But I have found them to be quite useful in figuring out if I wrote good code or not. Less useful later on for, finding bugs later on, but at least initially I find them very useful for just verifying my code is correct. So I started writing some. I wrote one yesterday, and I'll just continue with that. Here's what the class looks like. I'll do a quick tour of it just to refresh my own memory and start thinking about the test cases. Okay, canvas component. It's in charge of rendering one rectangular area of the canvas. It could be used for a mouth, an eye, or something else. Okay, so you imagine your canvas, your two-dimensional canvas. That's the scene that we're going to paint upon, and there'll be a whole bunch of canvas components on it, which are responsible for rendering little rectangles inside of it. Okay. So because the relationship between head, eyes, mouth is hierarchical, it makes sense for canvas components to have parents and children, and there's these offset coordinates which are added together with their parents' coordinates to figure out the absolute coordinates on the canvas where something's going to be drawn to. Okay. There's a loading callback. So this canvas component, it may need to load in some bitmaps and stuff to be ready to render. And I've got some state management around that. Whether or not it's load or not, that's one of the first things I tested. Okay, then coming down here, there's some basic getters and setters, which honestly, they're not really worth unit testing those. I wouldn't worry about that. The stuff that's maybe a little more worth spending an hour writing unit tests on is this loading, state machine handling, state handling stuff. Down here with the render, I think I might want to test. This one's a little bit tricky to think. What exactly am I testing? I'm not sure if I can test anything very well here. I'm not a fan of writing tests around implementation details. I want to write tests around the contract. So an old version of me that wanted to test everything, no matter what, 100% code coverage, that sort of deal, would have said just stub out the implementation details in such a way that you can see if it's being called correctly or if it's behaving correctly in response to how it's called. But if it's not part of the contract, I really don't want to write tests around it. I'll just let my runtime behavior guide me a little bit, or maybe later on there might be something which suggests a better contract, like I could see what is the output of rendering and compare it against a snapshot or something like that. But I think the main thing that I want to test is this loading state management stuff. It's asynchronous. So now that I've talked through that and it's sharpened my thoughts a little bit, I think I want loading as one subsuite under the top level test suite. Okay. Then I want to start thinking about some of these other cases to test. So let's see. So if I call load and if I call load and the load function that I set in the constructor actually does some work, then I should be able to just have the load call fulfill the promise. So I'll just say loading load returns promise that is fulfilled. Yeah, I like to write it a little bit more broadly. What am I testing? Let's just say loads asynchronously. Okay, and this one needs a little done callback because it's going to be asynchronous, and we'll say component load then, and we say done. Okay, what is it complaining about? Oh, I need to pass some data to it, so we'll say done. There we go. All right, so I'm pretty sure that both of those are going to pass, but let's just test it out real quick. Okay, npm run test. This will run the test suite. In fact, I'll do coverage. So I can. Okay, so my test passed. That's fine. And as expected, there's all kinds of lines that aren't covered. I don't really aim to cover them all, but it is interesting to me to see which things aren't covered as I write more tests, because often that'll point out some little nook or cranny that I need to make sure is correct. Some set of statements down one execution path that I want to hit with my tests. Okay, so let's see, what else can I test? I want to test that init data passed to load is available to render callback, on render callback, is available for rendering. Yeah. Wherever I can, I try to write in that sort of plain English sentence style rather than saying specifically like what methods and stuff are involved in. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Okay, this will also need a done function because it's asynchronous, and we'll need to pass some init data const. Init data equals bam bam. Yeah, let's give it something inside of it to pass along. Okay. On load, do nothing. On render, I want to make my own render function because that's where I'm actually testing. So we say expect component state want to include the init data that was passed. Okay, so we say init data. Yeah, parentheses off there. Let's move this over here. Okay. Then load, and then let's do render. Oh, I gotta pass a context to it. Can I just make a fake context? Is that gonna take longer than actually getting a real context? Let's just get a real context. Oh, except this is going to execute in Node.js rather than a web browser. So, okay, let's stub out the context. That should be fairly easy. Const fake context equals boom as what's it? Canvas context 2D. Then we say let's pass a fake context. It's not going to be used in any way. That is a bit of an implementation detail, but that's all right. Okay, render. What else? What else do you want? You want? That's it. You just want context. Okay. So then, what should happen is I instantiate the Canvas component. I pass in my two callbacks. I call load, passing in this initialization data. And then when I render, what should happen is that this init data is passed into on render. On render. Change this to be passed to on render. Okay. And then here it should call this. What if on render doesn't get called? That would be kind of bad for me, and I might miss it with the current test. So let's make sure on render is called. Was on render called equals false. Down here we say was on render called equals true, and we also say down here, after we called render, this should be truthy. Okay, like so. All right. That was a more complicated test. Did I write it correctly? Oh. So this is incorrect. To equal. Okay, component state was just an empty object. Okay, it was an empty object, and I expected to get the init data passed. All right, so already my unit test is uncovering a bug. Good for it. So then, what's the issue? What's the issue? So I've got the load. Onload should return a promise. Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Onload actually needs to return something. So that's up to the implementation of onload to do that. So that means I need to make another function in here. Function onload. And I don't know. I think that's wrong. I don't know. I gotta think about that. So the way I've got it coded here is that onload gets called with init data, and it's going to return component state. I see. Okay, now I need to catch up with what yesterday's version of me was actually thinking. So it's not the init data that gets passed through, it's the component state, which could be based on the init data, but that's not part of the contract. Okay, so I need my own onload, and I'll have it. Data promise, just do async function. Then I can have it return the init data, but that's not part of the contract. So let me write the contract correctly. We'll say component state generated by load is available for rendering. Okay. And also the init data has nothing to do with this really. So let's make the test simpler. Okay, let's say component state equals x2. Okay. And then for load, I call load. I don't. Okay, yeah, I just pass that. Then I expect component state to equal that. Oops. Name the same thing. Let's call this expected component state. Okay. On here, I want to return expected component state. There we go. That's better. this needs to be on load. Okay, so that might work. It did. Okay, cool. That worked just fine. All right, what else is worth testing? Okay. We'll say here we can also expect component is loaded to be truthy. That's fine too. I think I can do a little bit of useful testing on the render functions because they call a callback, and that is part of the contract. That's not an implementation detail. So let's create a new subsuite called rendering. Okay, so render calls back the call calls back the callback, calls back on render. Okay. Function on render. So, yeah, let's do the same thing here. This is redundant with another test, but I like it being here again because I'm more specifically calling out the contract. Okay, so this very similar. I guess we need the fake context. Oh, wait. Yeah, that. I think that should probably work. Okay, exception. What? What? It's not a very useful error message it gave me. Oh, well, what's this? Oh, I got this in the wrong spot. Got it. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, that's fine. Let me see though, because there's going to be a bunch of redundant code here. I should maybe do it before each and do some setup so it's not quite as verbose. Let's do it before each. You know, maybe I don't need the load. Because the load doesn't necessarily affect rendering. So if I do that, and this isn't so bad, I could do throw this up here. Okay. Then this is not quite as verbose, but also I could do for each. So what is onRender called equals false. Okay. But last render x -1. Last render y equals -1. Okay. Then we can do one function here. Okay, I'm glad I wrote this code because it's going to be able to test out the hierarchical stuff, which is a little more error prone. Okay, so this let's see. Renders to component coordinates. So here I can go component x equals 5 component y, or offset y 7 I'll be more specific. Absolute coordinates renders to its offset coordinates as absolute coordinates renders to absolute coordinates based on offset when it has no, when component has no parent. Okay, so I expect last render x to equal X and same for Y. Oops. Equal 5. Equal 7. See how that did. No. Okay. Okay, well, this first one here failed, so let's see what was up with that first. Yeah, so I'm just gonna change this to IT only. Let's figure out this one first because it's the simpler of the two tests that's failing. Okay, so what is onRender called is return false. No. So this will get reset on each test. But when render is called here, it should be calling this and having these values set. Let me make sure it's getting called. Oh, I know why it's not being called. I know why it's not being called. Because I have logic that says if we haven't loaded it, we're not going to render. Is that right? Yeah. That is right. And that is good behavior. So I should actually be testing that. We'll say, we'll change these tests because the behavior is actually correct. The tests are wrong. Render does not call back on render when it is not loaded. Okay. That's taken a while. Okay, what? What? Oh, because I've got this done here. Okay, now it passed. This one down here will fail. So now I need to load. So say component load, and then some init data. So then. Done. Okay. Okay, so that should fix that. We'll have to do the same thing down here. Okay, so we go It feels like, oh, done wasn't called here. Okay, done. There's another done that's not getting called. Which one is it? Calls back on render when it is loaded. Yeah, okay. If I see load here, what's the deal? Do we get to here? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe the expect failed? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this is why. Because that threw an exception, done was not called. Or because that interrupted execution. Okay. So this is the correct assertion to make. Okay, now I'm back to passing. Good. Okay. So this is shaping up correctly. Render at just absolute coordinates, ignoring component offset. How's that do? It's fine. Okay. Okay, render with children. Phew. The hierarchical ones are going to get weird. I'm just thinking, do I want to complicate this setup? I don't think I do. I think I want to do rendering a single component. Then I'll create a separate subsuite for rendering nested components or hierarchical components. Okay, but let me also make sure render with children for a component with no children will call on render. Don't need that. expect was on render called. Okay, good. By the way, I'm down to 3 lines, 3 lines of code that aren't executed by the tests, which is pretty nice. Like, I don't like to write tests starting out with the idea to cover all the lines. I like to write tests against the known contract of the module or class and keep writing tests to cover all that. Then I come back and see what's still not covered. And it's going to be pretty easy to get 100% coverage on this module. And that's like not writing bullshit tests. That's just writing tests that are legitimately coupled to the contract or what the class is supposed to do. Okay, so let's start another one of these for the more complex multi-component cases. Rendering hierarchy of multiple components. And let's see. What's a good way to do this? I think I can pass it in like a string in the component state that can be used as an index to store this information. So if I say type render result equals I always forget the syntax for this kind of type. Type render results equals, and then we do, I think it's like a component code string. Is this the right? That. Okay, so I do that, then I say do render results component code equals what is on render called. I don't actually need this variable because the presence of it will the presence of it underneath that one component code will tell me it was rendered. Render x. I can make this a little briefer too. X, Y, okay. Okay, so that, I'll do that. Let's do an onload function, onload And it's going to ask for init data, but I will use component code as a string. Does that work? Okay, and then this is an async function. Promise string. What? What? Yeah, I declared a value. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Unload. Okay, what's up here? What did I did this already? What did I do before? Let's just take this down and just drop it beneath and figure out what the difference is. Is that any versus, oh, I need to return. That's all. It's complaining about the may not return anything. That's fine. Okay. All right. Before each, we just say render results. We're going to clear it out by just assigning that to it. Okay. So let's start running the test. Okay, it render calls on render for, let's do this other one up here with the different version. Renders to relative coordinates based on offset, based on combined offsets of nested components. Okay. So we say, let's do 3 components. Const component A equals new canvas component. No, let's do unload. Okay, and we'll just do BC. Okay, B. Okay, and set up each of these. Component A equals X equals, nope, offset X equals 1. Offset Y equals two, right? That'll be the parent node. here I get to set a different value. So let's do 3 and 4. And also component B, parent will be component A. Okay. And then one more. Oh, I see a mistake I made. Okay, must load all of these. You know what? This code will get repeated a lot, so let's make that part of the before each setup. Okay, this as well. Okay. So then we say let's render component C. Okay. Expect. Wow, let's see. Oh, that's right. In fact, let's do. Okay, expect x to equal, and then it's just going to be all of these added together. 4 plus 5, 9. Expect y to equal 6 plus 6, 12. All right. I give this a 50% chance of being successful the first run. All right, here we go. It worked. Nice. Okay. So the rest of these are pretty interesting to me to make sure they work. This is the most complicated logic here. If it works with all my tests, that's great. Okay. Render calls back on render even if parent is not loaded. Okay. So that was important to me. I wanted to say that like things basically work all the time. Just we won't try to render anything for a component that hasn't finished loading. So if I take out the load on B and just let A and C load, This should be the same result. It is, good. Oh, I got 10 minutes left. I'm pretty close to being done here. I can do it. I can get it done. Let's do render with children. Renders just everything. So let's take out B because I want to check that, that if it's not loaded, it won't be rendered. So we'll say expect render results A to be defined. Expect render results B to be defined. It's interesting to me, I didn't actually have to call done, but I think that's only because, let's see, not to be defined. There we go. I think that's only because my promise is just being resolved immediately. I think that's the only reason why. So let me put dones into all the ones that need them. Okay. Well, basically all of these tests need it. So done. Let's see, where's it at? Canvas component test. I really wish they would design this error message so it pointed exactly to the issue. That's not helpful. Just is not helpful. All right, so let's narrow it down the old-fashioned way. Try one at a time. One at a time. Okay, are you running? Okay, that works. Then let's move on to the next. That works. Okay, it's just this last one. And I think it's because I didn't call render. That's why. That's all. Network error. Am I still streaming? Twitch failed on me. No, I'm still streaming. I'm good. Twitch failed, not me. Render with children. Okay, let's see if that works. Oh, come on. Okay, so A was not defined. Oh, because I did component C. So if I do A, I have to call the top level one. So if I do A, okay, now what? Now what? Now what? Oh, are you saying? Okay. Let me throw B back in just to see if that's the reason. If that's the reason why C wasn't rendered. That means that this is going to screw up, so let's go with that. C? C should have been good. Okay, C was undefined. Check to get the parents right. So C, the parent, its parent is B, and B's parent is A. So that looks correct. Okay, let's see. Console log, component data. Component state, actually. And that's wrong. It's like that. What? Yeah. Just, oh, come on. That's a private. Okay. I don't get to know inside of here what the component state is. Let me just do the X and the Y. That'll give me enough information. Component add. Okay. So it did do the first one. 1, 2. It did not render B. Okay. So it probably got to here. Console log. Oh, the children aren't set. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. This points to not a bug, but like a usability issue. So if I set the parent, I want the child to be set at the same time. Probably that's true for setting children as well. Okay. So if I set the parent, I should probably not allow a setter here though, because my policy with these properties is they shouldn't have side effects. So I was tempted for a moment to say, okay, if we're going to set the parent, then what I'll do is I'll go to the parent object and I'll set children So it's basically like a double linked list. There's a link in each direction. But I don't want to violate that notion that setting a property is just a no side effect thing. So I should probably create methods for adding children or reparenting. But for the moment, what I'm going to do is just explicitly set them. And then tomorrow, I can write like a nicer solution that has a method that sets the relationship. And this code would probably be revised a bit, but I would just like to kind of finish up here at a nice stopping point. I think I'm close to that. So I'll say component B children equals component C. All right. So if I do that, okay, then I'm back to succeeding. Okay, cool. Okay, the other one I want to test is that if there's one in the middle, it is not loaded. If a component is not loaded. It will not get okay, let's see what that goes. Man, what? Almost done here. Okay. Okay. So it did friggin' call the loaded, or it called the render thing for one that is not loaded. I do not understand why. Because here I would have checked. I would have said, are we loaded? Are we loaded? If we're not loaded, don't call this. So where's the hiccup? I said load A. I said load C. Let me put this back in. And yeah, let's use the cleaner syntax. Just care about you. That's my wife saying, we're gonna eat. You want to eat? She says, can we do fancy Mediterranean? I would say, yeah. 5 minutes. Oh yeah. I want to solve this. I hate leaving problems unsolved at the end of a session. Okay. So what? We only received one? We only received... Wait, no. No. Start over. Wait, that one passed? It's not. Ah. Okay, mark that. Okay. Okay, that one passed. So that is that not the one that was failing? One of the other ones started failing? Okay, do it again. Something else is failing. Which one's failing? Does not render in a sequence. If I run it by itself, it succeeds. That makes me think that before each is not clearing out the render results. Jesus. There it is. There's the before each. There's where it clears it out. So if I do this, then with everything else it fails. I think it's going to say B is defined. Is this like not? Is this not running? Console log for each. Yeah, it's getting called. Okay. Then tell me this. Tell me this. At the start of the test, are you going to succeed or not? Let's see which one it barfs on. No. Yeah, it's not barfing on the first one. That means before each is running. Because otherwise it wouldn't get all the way down to here. So before each is doing its job, oh, I got it. I got it. It's the component's already in a loaded state. That's because I was sloppy and used this stuff here. So we'd say let yeah, it's just persisting state between the two. Okay, I'm gonna say boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom. Okay, and come back to here. Now we're good. All right, that's it. Done. End of stream. And I am anxious to get back to this. Like, I hate that I had this small amount of time to work on it. Really bothers me. Not have enough time for everything. Anyways, that's it though. Gonna stop the stream and go eat some food with my lovely wife. All right. Whoever is lurking out there, thanks for joining. I do appreciate it. I'll catch you later. Stopping the stream. Stop.